Some people rock and some people roll. Some will make you giggle right down to your soul. She'll talk to the world and introduce them to you. And look at me now, I'm all Barbara and you. You gotta take a step inside the shoes of another. Get to know your neighbor, get to know one another. She'll talk to the world and introduce them to you. And look at me now, I'm all Barbara and you.
Good evening and welcome to our program. I'm so glad you could join us tonight. This is Jennifer Dorgan, who is the Executive Director of the Literacy Volunteers of America. Quite a nice title to have. And I mentioned last week when I was telling people who was going to be on this week, I did mention the late Gloria Mayberry, who was a dear friend of mine. And Gloria was she was in your position, and she was the face of Literacy Volunteers of America in North Central Massachusetts, at least. And while she was very outgoing and always wanted to be promoting the agency, she never wanted to come on my TV show. And we lost her a few months ago, and many of us who knew her didn't even know how sick she was. So I just wanted to be sure we want everybody to know we are having this program in honor of Gloria Mayberry. And Jennifer, I believe you told me when we met that you had not had the pleasure of meeting her, but you certainly heard a lot about Gloria.
You know, I feel like I met her because every day that I go into our office, her old office, now my office, I'm just surrounded by the work that she did tirelessly every day. She just was so committed to the mission of the organization, and she would work long days just trying to do everything that she could to help the people that we served. And what she did over 20 years is really phenomenal. So I'm surrounded by her connections, her friends, her achievements. And I did have the pleasure of talking to her on the phone numerous times. So I feel that she got to know me a bit, and I certainly feel like I know her well, and she feels like a friend to me. So it means a great deal to everyone involved to be able to continue her legacy.
Well, that is important, and I appreciate that. And I think some of us have talked about the fact that Gloria did things the way she wanted as far as not letting everybody know how sick she was.
Yes.
So we were very saddened when she passed. But tell me a little bit about yourself. You were a very young person to be in such an important position. How'd that happen?
Well, I started volunteering with Literacy Volunteers when I was fresh out of college. And I'm actually from Connecticut, so this was in Waterbury, Connecticut. I was trying to figure out what to do with my German degree because I had changed my mind after originally thinking I was going to go into international business. I had become more and more interested in education, so I started volunteering as an English to speakers of other languages tutor in Waterbury, and just realized, wow, what a great organization, what a great way to make a visible difference in the issues that we see in our community. So it was really my introduction to nonprofit administration, which to me had never been presented as a viable career path. I think the assumption is that it's something that volunteers do. It's not necessarily something that you can make a living doing. And I actually ended up doing a number of other things between then and now before pursuing my nonprofit management certificate, and realizing that I could make being a Literacy Volunteers director my life's work.
You must be older than you look, and I'm not asking how old you are, but if you don't like looking young, you will as the years go by. But let me just to kind of clue the audience in, first of all, on how we met is I was going to hear my grandson, or was Sterling fifth grade at Sterling, night at Barnes & Noble or something like that. And I walk in and here's this lovely young lady at the front door, and she introduced herself. And when she said, I'm the executive director of Literacy Volunteers of America, I'm like, no, you're not Gloria Maybury. But we had a nice chat, and I invited Jennifer to come on the program. Jennifer with a G, mind you. Your mother was creative, but you have
My father, actually.
Oh, was your father, but you always have to tell people. It's
Yes.
Jennifer with a G.
Yes, I do.
But also, I want to rewind a little bit because I just jumped right into learning more about you. But I don't want to assume that everybody watching knows about Literacy Volunteers of America. So give them a basic definition of why it exists and what it does.
Sure. So we've been around for decades. So our local affiliate is Literacy Volunteers of the Montechusett area. So that's the Fitchburg office that I run. We've been around since 1973. And it was around that time that the Literacy Volunteers organizations started forming to address basic literacy, expanding access to literacy instruction and English language instruction based on the needs in our communities. So there were committed people out there who wanted to put in the hard work into volunteering as tutors to help people who, because they didn't have access to literacy instruction or English language instruction, were not able to achieve their potential as members of their community. And so it originally began as just a group of volunteers working very hard, and eventually became integrated into the state's public education system. We now receive funding from the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education as part of the adult basic education funding.
How long have you actually been in this position?
Only since last August, so it's been about 7 months.
Okay. And you mentioned that you were a major in German. Mm-hmm. And do you speak other languages besides English and German?
Well, I speak a little bit of Spanish and Italian. I do my best to get by with our students who speak Spanish, but it's always a humbling experience, I have to admit.
Let me tell you what a humbling experience is. I am feeling very humble when I'm around people who speak more than one language. I don't know that I could ever have an aptitude to learn another language, and it just must be so difficult to think in a different language, and I know a lot of people that are multilingual, and I have great admiration for anybody that can speak more than one language.
Yes, and what I think makes it especially difficult for our students is that they are trying to support themselves and their families at the same time as they're trying to learn English and adjust to life in the United States. So that level of empathy for them, of having been in the experience of trying to learn another language and realize how difficult it is, particularly when the stakes are as high as they are for our students. It's really important to be able to see that.
What do you mean the stakes are as high as they are?
So our students come from their home countries, our English language learners, they come from their home countries either to find a better life or sometimes because they really have no choice because of the conditions that they're under in their home countries. And so they come to the U.S. and oftentimes with their families, and they just have to do the best they can to get by and to provide for their families. And really our English language learners who come to us, they're the cream of the crop. They are hardworking. They have lots of other things really that they need to be doing, but they come to us because to them their English is not sufficient to achieve their personal and professional goals, and they're ambitious. A lot of them were highly educated professionals in their home countries. They often want to start businesses in the United States using the skills that they had in their home countries. So they are doing the best they can to support themselves and their families in the United States and better themselves.
So are the students that come to Literacy Volunteers, are they all adults?
Yes, we serve adults and out-of-school youth 16 years and older. Anybody younger than 16, really the public schools are the ones who serve that population, and we are part of the adult education system. Now, there are a lot of adult education providers who run classes, and so they serve that population too, but we are unique in that we offer flexible, personalized, confidential tutoring to adult learners. And particularly as far as our basic literacy students are concerned, adults who read at a 6th grade level or below, that there often simply aren't classes that serve them. And for our English language learners, they are often so busy with their jobs and taking care of their families and everything else that they don't have time to attend classes. So it's really important to provide them with another option, and that's what we do.
Well, how do you teach language differently than it's taught to children in school?
Well, adult learners are very different from children because they have a whole set of experiences that they can draw on when they're learning. So they're able to reference a much broader context than children are. And that makes a big difference when teaching, say, language, when you can reference the grammar of your first language. It can help you pick up the grammar of your second language more quickly. Or with basic literacy instruction, you can draw on your understanding of a topic, and that will help you approach a text and get meaning out of it more easily than if you were a child and didn't necessarily have that experience.
Two thoughts came to me while you were saying that. One is, I've thought for years that another language should be taught conversationally the way babies learn to speak. Toddlers learn to speak. You just speak it, and then later you learn the rules. But in school, a lot of what they have to learn is kind of boring. The grammar and the punctuation and all of that. You know a lot more about it than I do. Would you speak to that?
Certainly. Well, we are all about teaching conversation. Conversational English is the goal of our English, ESOL, English to Speakers of Other Languages program. And the thing is that every learner is different. Some learners are going to find studying grammar and mechanics very boring and are going to pick up on spoken English a lot more quickly without that. Others might have had English language instruction in their home countries, but didn't necessarily learn to speak it. Those of us who have taken Spanish or French in high school and remember taking it for 6 years and studying the grammar, but not really being able to speak it at all can relate to that, I'm sure. But they have the grammar, and that is important. That's an important resource in the tutor's toolkit. When the tutor is working with them on their English, it can help clarify certain things. For myself personally, as a student of language, I can't really retain any new words or new sentence structures unless I see them written out. And everybody's brain is different, and language learning really brings that to the forefront. So the reason why it's so important that we have a customized program that arises out of the one-on-one setting in which our tutors and students meet is because all of our students are different. And so our tutors and students typically meet for about 2 hours a week, but they make that 2 hours really count because of the way that it's customized to the individual student, their learning style, and their needs.
So we're not talking classrooms here.
That's right.
Oh, so everyone who is a volunteer tutor actually sits and talks with somebody.
That's right.
How do you get your volunteers? What criteria do they have to become a volunteer?
So the only official requirement is that they've completed high school. And other than that, anybody who's interested in becoming a volunteer just needs to basically be culturally sensitive and have the open-mindedness to work with people who have just a totally different background than them. Speaking another language is not required. In fact, in some ways it's better if the tutor doesn't know the student's first language, because that way the student can't fall back on that if they're struggling with something in English. And teaching experience is not required either. We have a training that is 18 hours in total, 6 3-hour sessions, and it teaches volunteers the skills that they need to know in order to work one-on-one with a student, either in English or in basic literacy, and to design customized lesson plans and a customized curriculum for their student based on the individual student's needs. And the training is interactive, it's hands-on, it's a lot of fun. 3-hour sessions sound pretty long, but it just flies by, I assure you, yes.
But you have criteria that they follow, I would assume. They're not making up their own curriculum.
Well, we have suggestions, we have models, we have resources.
Okay.
I am a resource for our tutors, and if they ever get stuck, I'm here to help. But the goal of the training is for the tutor to be able to assess what the student needs and design their own lesson plans and their own curriculum to meet those needs.
Wow. And when you mentioned it might be better if they don't speak another language, that's really surprised me. And you said you struggle with your Spanish, but you really had studied it for 6 years?
I did.
Oh my goodness. But see, I would think it would be beneficial that if they're not getting something in English, that you could speak to them in their native tongue to help them understand the English.
Yes, it depends really on what you're teaching them. If you're teaching vocabulary and it's concrete topics, like teaching a student how to say a table, you know, it's a little quicker if you can point to a picture of the table or look up a table in a bilingual dictionary and translate it for them. But when it gets to grammar and more abstract topics, it's actually better for both the tutor and the student to challenge themselves, to get the student really thinking in English, to be able to articulate those kinds of things.
Years ago, I knew a young man who, I knew him as an adult, but he was brought to the United States with his German parents. Mm-hmm. And I guess it was in the summertime because he didn't start school right away, but he taught himself English from watching TV. And I guess that's possible because if you're visualizing what they're doing when they're talking about it. And I think years ago, with some of the immigrants years ago, the children would go to school and would learn English and come home and translate to their parents. So they were bilingual, and maybe the parents never mastered the language. I'm talking years ago. Mm-hmm. So if this is not a classroom setting, where do people have their one-on-one meetings?
So tutors and students, once the tutor finishes the training, I match them with a student, and I try to do the best I can to match them based on compatible personalities as well as scheduling and that sort of thing. Of course, their schedules have to be compatible. Then I put the student and the tutor in touch, and they determine a mutually convenient time and place. So most of our student-tutor pairs meet at the public libraries in the area. So the Fitchburg Public Library, where our main office is, Leominster, we have a number of students in Ayer and Gardner, and scattered throughout some of the other smaller towns in the area, like Townsend and Groton. So the library is the most common setting. Some of them meet in coffee shops or something like that as well, or even businesses owned by the student or members of the student's family.
Well, your job as executive director is multifaceted, isn't it?
Certainly.
The matching is a big part of it.
The matching is, that's really just the tip of the iceberg. I love the whole connecting with new people, meeting new students, meeting new tutors, training the tutors, supporting the tutors and students. I love that part, but that's not even the half of it. Grants administration takes up a big part of it as well. So making sure that our funders know that we're being responsible stewards of the money that they're entrusting in us, and keeping them in the loop as to what we're doing through things like reporting student progress, and that sort of thing is also a big part of my job.
So where do your finances come from?
Our finances come from two major grantors, the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and then the United Way of North Central Massachusetts. And that's the bulk of our funding. We raise enough to cover about 5% of our operating budget through the Barnes & Noble fundraiser, and additional funding comes from smaller private donations throughout the year.
And again, that's a big portion of your job.
Yes.
Is making sure there are enough funds.
Absolutely.
What are the numbers? Is there a waiting list for people? Oh, and do the students pay any fee at all?
No, the tutoring is absolutely free.
Okay. And do you have a waiting list? Do you need more volunteers? Listen up, folks.
Yes, we have a waiting list. We always need more volunteers. Currently, students have to wait about 4 to 8 months to be matched with a tutor. Yes. So every time we have a volunteer, we can change a life. I mean, the effects of the services that we provide to students just have profound differences in individuals' lives and in our community. Our students are able to do things like, I've mentioned opening businesses, participate in community activities like senior center activities, participate in the economy, as consumers, they're able to run errands on their own, go shopping. They're able to advance in their jobs, become more skilled employees, and just find greater personal fulfillment. So there are all of these very visible and far-reaching ways that volunteers' work changes a student's life and the lives of people around them. So it's not a casual volunteer commitment. It is a lot of work, but it's a lot of work for a tremendous reward, and we always need new volunteers.
And you always have a waiting list.
We always have a waiting list.
So we don't need to worry about getting the word out to people that you're there to help people.
That's right. Word of mouth is actually the main way that our students find out about us.
Right.
The word travels fast about the kind of service that we provide because it has been so helpful to their family and friends.
Mm-hmm. What is the most difficult part of your job? You have a lot of different duties.
Yes.
What's the struggle, the part that's a struggle?
It's trying to do the most I can with limited resources, whether it's time, and time is really the biggest one, mm-hmm. And funds, and tutors. Whenever somebody comes to me looking for help and I can't help them as quickly or as effectively as I'd like to, that gets me a bit.
You used a phrase earlier about a tutor's toolkit. What
Mm-hmm.
did you mean by that?
So our tutors are trained to be able to assess the student's situation and how they can help them. So things in a tutor's toolkit involve facts about the student and circumstances of the student's life that they can cater the program towards, as well as the resources provided by our program, such as our lending library of books, and the expertise provided by myself and the Greater Literacy Volunteers Network. We are really working on providing services for our tutors, and we just started a tutor book club that's going to meet for the first time in April, and that kind of thing. So I actually worked in a corporate job before this, and I approach our volunteer base from a customer service perspective. I really want to make sure that everybody has a really positive experience volunteering for us. So we are going to try going forward to have more support services and social events and that sort of thing for tutors.
Now, we're familiar with the term ESL, English as a Second Language, and is that term used in school settings where literacy volunteers is different? But
yes,
English is the goal, and it doesn't matter where the student, what their native tongue is. English is the goal.
That's right. We use ESOL, English to speakers of other languages, instead of ESL, English as a second language. We feel that ESOL better reflects the reality of our students who might speak many languages in addition to their first language in English, and we don't feel like it creates a hierarchy where, you know, they will always speak English as a second language, whereas we will always be the native English speakers.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Can you, without naming names or being too specific, but give me one really heartwarming circumstance of a life that was changed?
Yes, I can. So we have, like I've mentioned, a lot of students who had skills in their home countries that when they first get to the U.S., they're prevented by language and cultural barriers from pursuing. These include things like being an engineer, or in some cases being an artist. We have...
I have to warn you, you only have a minute to finish that
thought. We have one student who produces
fast,
a beautiful kind of art in her home country, inlaid woodcuts.
Okay.
She, since coming here and receiving our tutoring, is able to have a website with her art, and hopefully eventually a gallery opening, and even teaching art classes. So she's both participating in the community and the economy and the cultural life of the greater Twin Cities area, and is also able to achieve a greater personal fulfillment than she otherwise would have.
Well, I'm glad you were steered away from corporate and into nonprofit, which you said wasn't taught to you as a way to go. And obviously you've found your niche, and it's obvious that you enjoy what you do. And now give a 20-second commercial why people should volunteer.
If you would like to make a difference in your community about issues that seem overwhelming, you can really make a visible personal difference and make great friends, form great relationships with your students and other volunteers.
Okay, well, very well said, my dear, and I'm so glad you accepted my invitation to come and share with us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much.